It's going to be looking at dealing with hundreds more patients in the course of a year that makes a big difference to their lives, and that's what it's about the patient experience. I'm Lorna Hayes, Head of Community Response for the East of England Ambulance Service. So as an ambulance service, we've had community first responders since 1997 when we started with our volunteers, very much looking at the out-of-hospital cardiac arrest and getting defibrillators and volunteers in the local rural community. As that's progressed over time, we've identified that actually there are another pool of people that are really critically need to have patient attendance. So those patients that have fallen in the community, they haven't injured themselves, but they're unable to get themselves up, and their form of getting support is by dialing 999. We know a patient that has been on the floor for longer than an hour is potentially going to need a hospital treatment when we get to them and take them into hospital. That puts pressure on the NHS and increases the demand on the NHS and the demand on the ambulance service. We're always going to prioritise our critical care patients and our cardiac arrest patients over picking up someone that's on the floor. But actually that is something that our volunteers could do. This project's been able to be achieved because of the NHS Charities Together Charity. We've identified 18 communities where we have existing community first responder groups, and we can upskill them in the ability to do a patient assessment and lift a patient with lifting aids and linking with a clinical advice line. So it's not the community first responder volunteer who is discharging the patient from the scene, it's actually done with a communication and in partnership with a clinician from the control room, just to ensure that that patient hasn't got any underlying problems that may need a clinical assessment. Community first responders operate out of their own home, so by the nature of their response process is that they are a singleton responding to a patient. So if we were going to put a model out which picked up falls and looked at how we could lift patients in the community, it was very important for us to be able to identify lifting aids that are able to be done safely with one person. We can get to those patients quickly, pick them up and make sure that they're not injured, make sure there's no other underlying problems, then actually that patient gets a much better patient experience. They can stay at home, which is much better for them, and they can maintain their normal life. We have a very high leave at home rate without an ambulance backup for the patients that we are sending our volunteers to, and we've had some very positive experiences from the patient point of view, where they have had a very quick response, sort of often within 15-20 minutes of a 999 call, and a very positive experience of kind of being able to be supported and left at home. So we see a very positive experience from our patients. We see some positive experiences from our volunteers that feel that they can give more in their local communities, and we've seen the positive return of being able to not have to send ambulances, so that in effect gives us more ambulance hours back into the system to look after patients that do need a clinical intervention and a hands-on clinical intervention, rather than an assessment through a volunteer over the phone with that clinical process. So we've seen some very positive outcomes from what we've done, which is why looking at where we can go further forward, it's going to be looking at dealing with hundreds more patients in the course of a year that makes a big difference to their lives, and that's what it's about the patient experience. The other new model that we're also bringing in is community first responder cars. These will be based at an ambulance station. Volunteers from different communities can come and do shifts on those cars, and we will upskill those as well in falls capability and some other admission avoidance capability to actually enable them to go further afield, so we can attend communities where there aren't any CFRs, so that actually some communities that may be not large enough to host a first responder group, or may not have a first responder group because of the demographics within that community, could still receive this care, because we could actually be mobile around the region as the need demands. So the vision for where we're going is around actually providing a much better patient experience, and is around where there is a need for these patients to be treated.